Hey, it's Mr. Johns. Today we're going to be talking about power tool safety, and a lot of these tools only my older students are allowed to use, but I would like to at least have you learn what they are and how to use them safely, so when it does come up, you're ready and able to use the power tools. Now the first one is a tool that typically I don't use if I don't have to, and so I have never had a student use a table saw. So this is a table saw, very powerful, very useful. It is portable, so it's designed to be moved around. You can put it on a cart with wheels, move it to a job site, be working on a construction project, or you can just put it on a countertop in your garage, in your workshop. All right. The reason it's dangerous is because really it's just a spinning blade coming up through a slot in a table. And so you can imagine that it could be very dangerous. And so this dial allows the blade to go all the way down. So when it's not in use, I lock it all the way down, and so that blade is safely put away. The cool thing about this is that if you wanted to just create a groove or a channel in a piece of wood, you can just raise that blade part of the way. And if you needed to know, you could measure how far up that blade is out of the table. So if you needed a 1/2 inch groove, you could raise that up a 1/2 inch and then run your wood through it for shelving or anything else that you might need a groove for. So now, of course, if you needed to go all the way through a piece of wood, you're going to raise this all the way up. So the blade is higher than the piece of wood, and then you're going to run this piece of wood through it. Now, obviously the rule here is keep your clothing, hair, hands, fingers, arms, every body part away from the blade, right? Typically these will have, and if they don't, get one, some kind of push stick off to the side. And so instead of getting your hands through the blade, you get it started, and then you can use the push stick to push it through. All right. So one thing to be super aware of with table saws, if there are nails, which I see some staples here, if there are nails or screws or even a knot in the wood, it can cause the blade to grind or catch. Or if you're pushing it through crooked, it can cause it to bind or catch, and it can spit it back at you. So another reason it's dangerous is not just the sharp blade, but also that it can bind and throw wood at you. So I typically don't love this particular saw. I use others when I can, but I wanted to demonstrate. It's going to be very loud. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate. Basically, I'm going to turn it on, I'm going to use the push stick, and I'm going to push it through. You'll also notice that there are channels here, and so I can also put a guide, which will allow this piece of wood to stay perfectly straight. So typically, like my classroom, I don't know where it is. So we're going to just do it by hand. So here we go. Oh, it's also important to make sure you have enough room on the other side. So if I was cutting a big piece of plywood, I only have a few feet back here. I would want to move this saw to a table. It also creates a lot of sawdust. So we're going to make a mess. Oh, here's the tool. So it's right behind the table. That's good. And so we might as well use this because it doubles as a push stick. And so I can also push that through or do both. All right. Anytime you can help your cut be straighter, the better. So we're going to make sure this is on 90 degrees and tighten down. And so all it has to do is push through. And there's actually room for two, and I don't think I've got two back there. So if I had two of those, it would be pretty simple to push that piece of wood through with two of these guides, which would make it even more accurate. So, all right, let's go ahead and give it a ring here. When I'm done, I immediately use the crank and put the blade down because it's still plugged in. So just in case it got bumped or it turned on accidentally, I want to make sure that it's as safe as possible. So I chose not to use the push stick that time because the guide pretty much works as a push stick, and I kind of just work through it. One thing that I noticed, that as soon as it was almost done with the cut, it started to bind a little because it was no longer straight. I could feel this one start to bind just slightly and move backwards. So you still have to be super careful even in the most basic cut. All right, so that's it for table saw safety. If you get the chance to use one, follow those tips. You notice that I'm also standing on a carpet. I don't know if you can see that, but I'm standing on carpet, so it's not a slippery surface. And there's nothing crowded around the table, or I've got room to move the piece of wood. All right, so this is a drill press. It's one of our power tools, and probably one of our most useful power tools. So instead of using a hand drill, either powered or the old hand crank drills, this is a really nice way to just go straight down through a piece of wood. And the reason that it's so accurate is that it has a table where you place the wood, and then the machine will pull straight down with the handle here. So it will be a very straight cut. So some of the safety things to think of here, again, make sure you're on a non-slippery surface. Make sure you've got room around it. I keep the drill bits right next to it here just so it's handy. And then the tool that will change the drill bit is called a key or a chuck. And so it's kind of a funny looking thing, but it has kind of a bezel shaped gear drive on it, which allows me to put in the machine, and counterclockwise will loosen. And so what that does is it opens up this hole here and allows the bit to drop out. So to put the bit back in, we're just going to hand fit that. So kind of hand tighten it. Do make sure it's straight up and down. One mistake people make is they put it in crooked, and it's possible. So make sure it's nice and straight, and then give it a little snug to the right, clockwise. Just a snug turn. So just a quarter turn. So that is basically how you change a bit. And there's a variety of different bits that you can use. So it doesn't have to be just a typical drill bit to go straight through. This is a Forgener bit, so it'll do like a recessed recessed circle. There are hole saws that are designed to go all the way through, hole bits go all the way through and create a hole in the middle. But otherwise, most drill bits are just different sizes, diameters of bits. And so you want to obviously match the bit size to the hole that you need. So we're going to go ahead and drill a hole through this 2x4 that I used previously on the table saw. And what's important here is that the plate is right in the middle, because there's a hole here. You can see my finger going through, so that when you're done drilling, the drill bit will go through the hole and not into the plate. I can see there are some little divots in the plate from students who did not follow that, because this plate does move. So if people aren't paying attention and they're just drilling quickly, they can damage the plate. So I noticed that to get this bit through this piece of wood, I need this plate to be as high, as tall as possible. So there's a crank over here on the right that lowers and raises the plate up. And so I'm going to go just about as high as I can. Now, if it still doesn't go all the way through, I can lower this bit with that chuck. So go ahead and move that piece of wood. I'll show you. I can, counterclockwise, just drop that bit down and then tighten it again. There we go. So now I've got a lot more bit, and you can see that I needed that extra room there to go all the way through. All right. So now that I did that, it doesn't fit, so I have to lower the plate back down. And some models of drill presses will have either a laser light, which this one does, and it gives me an X pattern on the wood, which shows me exactly where the hole is going to be. And so that can be handy. And then it also has a flashlight, kind of a light so I can see a little better if it's a little bit dim, which it is right here. And you can have both on if you want, but just remember to turn them off when you're done. So all you have to do to turn on the drill press is up on the power, hold the wood or the object you'll be drilling into, and then nice and slow through the wood. And you should feel, sometimes I go up and down a couple times to kind of clean it out, and then turn it off. You go up and down, just kind of clean it out a little bit, just to make a nicer hole. And then I tap away the sawdust and make sure that it went all the way through, which it did. But sometimes on the back side, it'll be a less clean hole, and this time it did a good job. But if that does happen and you need it to be a nice hole on both sides, you can flip it over and you can clean out the hole from the other side if you need to. But that's it. It's just a super easy tool to use. As far as safety goes, for girls or guys that have longer hair, make sure that it doesn't get close to the blade, because that'll wrap it up in a hurry and cause some damage. Other than that, it's a fairly safe tool, so my students are allowed to use this as often as they want to. It is pretty much just straight down through a piece of wood. Obviously, you're keeping your hands away from the blade, shouldn't be there, should be holding the piece of wood and lowering the bit down, and that's it. If you wanted to put a clamp here, you certainly could if you wanted to clamp a piece of wood down or the material, but you typically don't need to. You can just kind of hold it off to the side. So that is really it for drill press safety. Mr. John's out. Circle, and the blade is only facing out. And it is, I say this about all my tools, but it's one of my favorites. So this is the tool that I use to cut CO2 dragsters, or just to do really quick cuts on medium-sized wood, right? So you can buy different blades, different number of teeth, to be smoother, finer, or to be coarser and cut through thicker wood. And they make bigger bandsaws and smaller bandsaws. And so this is just kind of your average sized hobby shop bandsaw, bench bandsaw. And it does take a little bit to get it set up just right so the blade doesn't fall off, and so it's the right tension. But once you have it, it'll last a long time if you don't push the blade. Now, I always tell my students that these are designed to cut straight, but if you're careful, you can do a little bit of bending. And so I can go through light wood, like balsa wood, really easily and do some nice curves for my students to help them with their shapes of their dragsters and things like that. I can't do crazy curves. I mean, I can't do, really up and down and in circles and half circles. It won't do that. I mean, think about this. This is a blade, and it's designed to cut straight. That's what it's designed for. Now, if I'm cutting through a piece of 2x4, it's going to have to work at it, right? It will make it, and I'm going to do it here in a second. But there's a reason. Remember to choose the right tool for the right job. If I really needed to cut this 2x4, I would use either the table saw, or the chop saw, which I'm going to get to shortly. But this bandsaw is super easy for cutting little pieces quickly. Big pieces like this, not so quickly. I usually wear ear protection. I should have wore it for the table saw, because that one's the loud one, and so it's really just protection. So if you have ear protection, use it. I'm going to go ahead and put it on for this. And one of the things that I don't like about bandsaws is they don't go very straight unless you are very slow and methodical and careful. So it's good to have a line drawn which I don't, but this is just a demo. And this is really thick wood. So I'm going to go slow and see what it does. Oh, the on-off switch right here. And a lot like the drill press, same thing. Make sure if you have long hair, any loose clothing, you don't get close to the blade with that. So, and as far as danger goes, one of the only things that can be dangerous, other than loose clothing or hair getting caught in this blade, is if your hands get too close. Now, obviously, you're in here working, pushing the wood, but keep your hands far out to the sides as you're cutting. On occasion, when I've been cutting dragsters for students, I go in there and I'm doing some pretty detailed stuff. Sometimes it will pull that piece of wood sideways, and it can pull your finger right into the blade. So, as always, safety first. Keep your fingers away from the blades. And plug it in. That'd be great. There we go. So it definitely does the job, no problem. Straight, not really. So I didn't have a line to follow, but even with a line, it's a lot like with a jigsaw, like a powered jigsaw. Those things really are tough to keep straight. And so with these, sometimes you have to kind of bend the piece of wood a little bit just to force that blade to go straight. But it did the job, right? Probably not the best tool for the job, and I'm going to show you that one next. Another way to keep this safe when not in use, other than unplug it, you can drop the blade cover right here so that fingers can't get in there just in case. And so that's just kind of a safety thing. All right, so that's it for bandsaw safety. All right, so now for my favorite power tool. If I could only choose one power tool to own, it would be a chop saw. So it will do just about everything. Maybe not the precise straight cuts of a bench bandsaw. Maybe not drill a hole like a drill press. Maybe not slice through a long piece of wood like a table saw. So it's good to have all of them, but if I only had one, it would be a chop saw. This is the tool that I see at construction sites most often. If you just take this, they're either on a portable table or they just lift it, throw it on the back of their tailgate in their truck. I mean, super useful. So what's cool about it is that instead of the blade coming up through a table and you having to push through the blade, this one you just bring the blade down through the wood. So as far as safety goes, it's awesome. It's got a protective cover, and literally you just turn it on, pull it through. And then as far as accuracy goes, it's got this fence on the back that keeps, and you can move that, but it keeps this wood perfectly straight so that this cut is going to be a 90-degree cut. Another couple of adjustments you can make, which is really cool, is right now this is on 0 degrees. It's perfectly straight. I can release this, and I can slide this to 10 degrees, anything I want. If I want a 25-degree cut, I put it on 25, lock it in place, and then turn it on, pull it down through. You know, that's really useful if you're doing multiple angled cuts. If you're making a picture frame and you need 4 cuts that are exactly the same, this is the way to do it. All right. The other thing I like about it, let's get that back to 0, right there. The other thing that's nice about it is you can also loosen the machine in the back and angle it this way. So if you've got some kind of weird angled cut that you need this way, I'll just put it on 25 degrees this way. And now my chop saw will chop straight through at an angle. Okay, and in this case I'd have to move the fence a little bit, but so that gives me the angled cut that way. So super cool, love it. So let's go ahead and do just a 0 degree chop. We're plugged in. As far as safety goes, just so I can say this real quick, same thing as all the other blades. Keep long hair, loose clothing, fingers away from the blade. This one's fairly simple. But just make sure that your fingers, if this piece starts getting so short, as a matter of fact, this is about minimum for me, that I don't feel comfortable going much shorter than this. I don't like my fingers to be, I have to hold it somewhere, right? Now I could go get a push stick and hold it with that, but I like to kind of hold it off to the side and go straight down through like that. But any smaller, probably not, it's not going to be as safe. And then the other thing is when it's not in use, it can go all the way down, the blade can go down into the table, and you can lock it with this tab here. So it's just a safety. It's a good idea to keep the blade, because if someone walked by and just turn it on, we want to make sure no one gets hurt. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and cut through this. Pretty simple. Against the fence, I'm going to hold it on this side so you can see better, and I'm going to go straight down through. Yes, it could kick back if I'm not careful, but especially the shorter it gets. But it's a pretty simple and safe saw. Woo, okay. So there's my pieces of wood. I'm going to go ahead and lock this down. And the nice thing is these are the straightest cuts of any of these tools, because it had... All right, we're going to finish up our demonstrations of power tools and power tool safety. So I had previously mentioned, I think I called it a skill saw. I meant scroll saw when I was doing the chop saw. In the corner there was a scroll saw. That's a saw that has a blade that can spin in circles, which allows you to do very intricate, detailed, curving shapes. And so I didn't really go into detail on that because I don't use it. I tend to break the blades a lot. I know some people who are very talented. Some classes that use that to create their CO2 dragsters. I break the blades, my students break the blades. I think we're impatient. So with a delicate touch, you can do some really cool things with the scroll saw. Skill saw, well, it's this, but skill saw is really just a company. So it's just like calling facial tissue Kleenex, right? So I try not to call it by its name. Like a hobby knife is a hobby knife, not an X-Acto knife. A skill saw is a jigsaw, not a skill saw. So one thing about skill saws, again, let's talk about safety first. Long hair, clothing, keep it away from the blade. They're relatively safe. And so these are available to my students to use. And I don't really have to worry about them that much. It's mostly the quality of the work that I worry about. So these blades are inserted. You just loosen this flat head screw here and pull it out, put another blade in. The biggest mistake made here is pushing too fast, which breaks the blade. All right. When I squeeze the trigger, it pumps the blade up and down. And I like the ones that have the variable speed, so I can squeeze faster or slower depending on what I'm cutting. Okay. So again, these are designed to cut most woods. Anything super thick and heavy and dense, maybe not. You can buy different blades that are better for cutting through different materials. You can buy blades for plastic, for example. So I'm going to cut through this piece of wood over here. I already have it mounted to the table. And one of the things that is important to note, they're fairly hard to keep straight. So draw your line and do your best to follow the line. Sometimes it actually means turning the saw because there's some flex in the blade, right? So that's the key. Don't just assume if you go forward, it's going to go straight. It doesn't always do that. So I like to start off slow, just like any other saw, just to kind of get that groove going. And really, you're pushing down as much as forward. And the mistake, again, my students make is they push forward and it just snaps the blade. Snaps the blade. So you're pushing down, and just allow the tool to do the job, right? And you'll hear me say this with other tools, but it's really important when you're almost through the cut to slow down. Otherwise, it'll just splinter and break. So slow down for a nice, neat exit cut. Like so. So, all right, so that's a jigsaw. So I wanted to talk about that. Super useful. It's portable. Obviously allows you to bring the tool to the project. All right, so next up, also a skill, not a skill saw. So this is just a drill, right? So the things I want to talk about, I've got 2 drills. And the reason I have 2 drills is because often you are drilling with a drill bit and then having to switch to a Phillips bit so that you can screw in a screw. Back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And they're designed to do that. So some of the power drills have a chuck or a key, like I mentioned previously. I like the ones that don't, so I just have to hold this inner ring and twist the outer ring counterclockwise to release the bit, which is nice. So, I mean, I can go back and forth between the 2, but what's nice is if you have 2 drills, just keep one with the Phillips bit in it. Right now, these both have Phillips bits in it. So, and then to tighten, you just hold the inside one, go clockwise until it fits right down in there, and then kind of cinch it. Okay, so I want to talk about cutting wood, drilling wood with a drill. There's a few things here. Sometimes the drill will move a little bit, and so it's not a bad idea. Where to put my hammer? 1 second. It's not a bad idea to have a nail or a punch handy. And so if I know I need my hole right in the middle, just give it a nice little tap with the nail, and then that's where the drill bit goes. And it'll follow that hole and go straight down through. Okay? It's the same with a screw. Screws will even walk around a little bit. So it's not a bad idea to just punch a hole, put the screw. That solves 2 problems. One, how do you make the thing stand up? How do you hold a screw? Because the threads are sharp. So how do you hold the screw? The nice thing is, once you punch a hole with a nail, it then has a place to stand, and all you have to do is drill straight down. So those are some of the tips I have. Keep separate drills if you have to. In my class, if you have to, grab them. If not, the other tip is use a nail and a hammer to create a hole, both for a drill bit and for a screw. And it makes your job so much easier. The last thing is, if you're trying to drill a screw, and by the way, there's a reverse on a drill, which allows you to take the screws out. If you're trying to go through a pretty dense or thick piece of wood, sometimes it's very difficult to get it all the way through, and it will start stripping the screw. And once it does that, it's very hard to get out and very hard to finish, maybe impossible to finish. And if you have cheap screw heads, like a Phillips head, if these are cheap ones, which this one is, it will start to chew this up. And so this no longer has the ability to fit into the screw. So the solution, do all of these things. Use a nail to start a hole. Use the drill bit to go, and by the way, don't go into a table. Put it over the table or put it on top of something else. And then go all the way through. Okay, and it's perfectly okay. It didn't go all the way through, so I'm going to go again. Not quite there. There we go. Nope, not yet. There it went. All right, so now the hole is all the way through. Now, why did I do that? Because now when I'm putting the screw, this is a short screw, but let's say I was putting a long screw all the way through. Now I have a hole, and this drill bit should be smaller than the screw, so that now when I'm putting the screw through, it'll go all the way through. Okay, so that's just a little advice. Make sure the hole's not too big for the screw. In my case, it is. I didn't have the correct screw or bit, but my example is drill a pilot hole all the way through. We'll tap it with the nail first. Drill a pilot hole all the way through with a small drill bit, and then screw all the way through. A lot of times you're putting multiple pieces of wood together, and that's a long ways for a screw to go through, and you don't want it to get stuck halfway and start stripping your material. So at least do the pilot hole all the way through the first piece of wood, and that screw will go right through. So anyway, there's some advice, some tips on using power drills that should help you out. Oh, as well as the jigsaw. All right, so that's it for power tools safety. Now that you have this information, you'll be able to come into my room or at home, build projects safely and with the right tool. Mr. Johns out.